I knew things at Brookhaven Dynamics were circling the corporate drain the moment an Outlook invite landed in my inbox titled Mandatory Fun plus the Family Thanksgiving Initiative. Attendance required. That's when I realized some overpaid idiot had finally weaponized the word festive. 3 weeks earlier, I'd already mapped out my usual holiday ritual. Reheated stuffing, a half-burned vanilla candle from last year's Secret Santa, and the quiet luxury of zero human interaction. Just me, my cat, and an old paperback mystery from the 80s. The kind with a woman in shoulder pads holding a gun like she's auditioning for a soap opera. Pure, undisturbed bliss. But then came Ethan. Ethan Price, the CEO's 29-year-old nephew. No resume, no background check, just a marketing degree from some frat-saturated college that used Greek letters to hide the lack of accreditation. They hired him as director of people strategy, which, near as I could tell, meant wandering the halls with an oat milk latte and saying words like synergy to people fixing the printer. I'd spent 19 years in operations, negotiating vendor contracts, saving budgets, juggling 7 calendars, and once stopping an IRS audit from detonating by finding an obscure clause mid-flight. Now, I had to explain what shared drives were to a man who called himself a culture architect. Ethan hated me, not the loud kind of hate, but the subtle, polished kind that hides behind fake laughter. I was legacy, as he liked to say. He'd called me Pam from payroll twice in front of other people. My name is Caroline Reed, and I don't work in payroll. Pam quit 2 years ago after they made her share a cubicle with a ficus. So when Ethan swaggered over to my desk the Monday before Thanksgiving, smelling like confidence and over-branded cologne, I braced myself. He leaned against my cubicle wall and said, "You don't have any family, right?" "Perfect. Work Thanksgiving. We're doing a company event, executives and their families. You're coordinating it." He didn't ask. He announced. I stared at him, blinked once, then smiled the kind of smile you give right before someone walks into their own trap. "Of course, Ethan," I said. "I'll handle everything." And I did. Oh, I handled it. I didn't argue, didn't protest. I followed every detail of his self-congratulatory culture refresh memo. The one with the Steve Jobs quote he'd misattributed and 3 different fonts. Buried halfway down was a new directive. All morale events must be processed through the Director of People Strategy using approved vendors and charged under Executive Morale subsection B. Cute. So I used his vendor, the overpriced one that billed $40 per chair and $20 for gluten-free stuffing. I booked the venue, the string quartet, the linen rentals. Every decision was his. Every approval, his signature. I built a paper trail so clean it could be entered as evidence. What Ethan didn't realize, what made my smile stay frozen and perfect, was that subsection B fell under an SEC compliance update passed last quarter. Any expense coded under that category over $5,000 required a board-level officer's co-signature. And Ethan? He couldn't authorize a $20 Staples receipt without his uncle's initials. I said nothing. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, procedural, and written in 11-point Arial. He wanted a Thanksgiving gala. He'd get one, with every receipt tied to his name. I booked the caterer that called themselves Elevated Nostalgia Cuisine, because nothing says culture like a 900 grazing board and artisanal Jell-O flight. Every quote, every form, every invoice went through his shiny new portal, the culture compliance system he forced on ops in his first week. He'd bragged it would eliminate bottlenecks. It did, by putting the noose around his own neck. I uploaded every file with his credentials stamped across the metadata. No handshakes, no side chats, no hidden emails, just clean documentation, the kind auditors dream about. His Slack comments were legendary. "Let's vibe this into greatness," he wrote, approving the $8,197.42 budget with a thumbs-up emoji. I printed that too. Then I started building the binder. Every memo, every form, every smirking approval went in, alphabetized, and cross-referenced. I wasn't being sneaky. I was being thorough. I was doing exactly what his memo required. The only difference was, mine would end in signatures, and his would end in consequences. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, the event looked like something out of a mid-tier tech startup's LinkedIn post. Too glossy, too forced, and one bad decision away from disaster. The venue was a rented hall in downtown Chicago, complete with twinkle lights, mock gratitude banners, and enough catered food to feed a small army of accountants. I showed up early, clipboard in hand, wearing the same expression I used during fire drills. Neutral, efficient, invisible. The caterers scurried around assembling elevated comfort fare. Deconstructed mashed potatoes, dehydrated cranberries dusted in gold flakes. Someone called it a visual journey of gratitude. I called it a waste of money with good lighting. Ethan strutted in like a man arriving at his own coronation. Sneakers that cost more than my rent, a blazer 2 sizes too tight, and that same smug grin that said I earned none of this, and I know it. He made a show of greeting every executive, every spouse, every bored child pretending to be thankful for kale bites. I didn't stay. I handed off the check-in list to a junior coordinator and slipped out before the first mimosa popped. The whole thing wasn't for me. My moment was coming later. On Friday, while the office was half empty and everyone else was still digesting turkey, I sat at my desk early, coffee steaming, and opened the shared drive. The photos had already started trickling in. Ethan posing with a wine glass, Ethan giving a toast, Ethan doing finger guns next to the CFO's toddler. The Slack thread read like a fever dream of performative enthusiasm. Great vibes, epic event, culture on point. None of the names looked familiar. Mostly new hires and interns who thought kissing up to the CEO's nephew was a career move. I scrolled, calm and steady. Then the all-hands email dropped. Subject: thankful for you. It was pure Ethan. This week's event embodied who we are: bold, inclusive, future-focused. Huge thanks to everyone who made it happen. No mention of me. Not even a token special thanks to operations. Nothing. I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened my encrypted folder, the one I'd started updating months ago when the culture began rotting from the inside. Inside were scanned vendor contracts, PDF receipts, and one beautiful SEC compliance memo dated October 2nd, confirming that any subsection B expense above $5,000 required a board officer's signature. I'd underlined Clause 8.3. Misclassification or unauthorized sign-off may trigger internal ethics review. That clause was my North Star. I smiled, small and deliberate. The following Monday, HR called me into a meeting. Marcy, our HR manager, was waiting with her pastel cardigan and weaponized kindness. "Caroline," she said gently, "we're realigning team structures for Q1. We'd like to transition you into a support-oriented role where your strengths can better shine." I translated instantly. "They're sidelining me. No more lead projects. No bonus. No annual review." A polite corporate demotion wrapped in soft language. I nodded once. She relaxed. "Do you need help transferring your files?" she asked. "No," I said, "but you might want to make sure you've archived Ethan's morale budgets correctly. Some of his adjustments to subsection B are creative." Her smile faltered just a fraction. "We'll review that," she said too quickly. I left the meeting calm, almost serene. At my desk, I renamed the folder on my desktop. E-Price, Ethics Packet, Preliminary Draft. Then I began adding new entries. HR's realignment memo, timestamp logs showing my access revoked at 11:59 a.m., and an org chart where Ethan's name now sat neatly above my old position. I'd seen this play before. They wanted me out quietly, erased with grace. Fine, let them. They forgot one thing. I built the workflow they were standing on. I still had the blueprints. That afternoon, as I shredded old notes and cleared my planner, I heard Ethan pacing in his glass office, rehearsing a pitch to himself. He looked like a man practicing for Shark Tank, gesturing to imaginary investors. He didn't even glance my way. He had no idea the walls were already shifting beneath him. I smiled faintly. My revenge didn't need noise. It needed precision and a well-documented audit trail. It happened the following Wednesday, in the one place corporate secrets always go to die, the third-floor print room. I was refilling the paper tray, the kind of mindless chore that somehow still belonged to me even after my realignment. The place was nearly deserted, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of toner. That's when I heard voices through the vent above the copier. Muffled, low, the kind of tones people use when they don't want anyone to overhear. If it's coded under executive morale, it needs an officer signature. Anything over $5,000 is a compliance-sensitive expense, especially after Q3 filings, said a voice I recognized instantly. Phil Barrett, our internal auditor. Methodical, humorless, a man who spoke like he was reading from a federal regulation. A second voice replied, sharper, clipped. But Dalton's name isn't on the signatory list. Never has been. That was someone from legal. Probably Rena Cho. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My hand froze mid-motion, a ream of paper half slid into the tray. Phil again. Then it's a breach. If that went through under subsection B without clearance, and it shows up on the quarterly report, we're looking at an ethics exposure. Maybe worse. A pause, then Rena asked, do we know who submitted the event file? Another pause. I could hear keystrokes, the faint click of his keyboard. Caroline Reed, Phil said. But it was routed through the culture compliance portal. All signatures trace back to Price's account credentials. And there it was. That perfect still moment when the world tilts and suddenly everything you've been building snaps into focus. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. They didn't know I was standing 10 feet away, frozen in front of a jammed printer, realizing I'd just handed them the rope Ethan had wrapped around his own neck. This wasn't petty anymore. This wasn't make the intern sweat revenge. This was structural justice. The kind that doesn't come with fireworks, but with clauses and signatures and timestamps. I'd followed every rule, every line, every instruction. I hadn't forged, faked, or misfiled a thing. The system was clean. Ethan's fingerprints were all over it. I slid the ream of paper into place and walked out slowly, heartbeat steady, expression calm. Back at my desk, I opened the binder, my quiet masterpiece, and added 2 new pages. The Q3 compliance memo, Clause 8.3, highlighted in red, and a screenshot of Ethan's culture memo, where he'd stripped the multi-signature requirement for morale expenses under $10K. He'd never reconciled that change with the SEC addendum that overrode it. He'd removed the safety net himself. The pages slipped into the binder like blades into sheaths. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt clarity. Ethan thought he was untouchable, a disruptor rewriting company culture. He didn't understand that culture, when weaponized, can explode just as easily as it can inspire. I didn't say a word to anyone. That's how people ruin moments like this. They get smug, start dropping hints, play coy with you'll see. I stayed invisible, the gray cardigan ghost of operations, the woman with the post-its and the paper cuts. Ethan strutted through the halls, dropping phrases like strategic pivot and holiday synergy boost. He thought the room revolved around him. Let him. Late that afternoon, an Outlook invite landed in my inbox. Q4, compliance review plus holiday budget reconciliation. Sent from the CFO's assistant, with every senior department head CC'd. Nothing flashy, just another beige meeting that could destroy a man's career. I RSVP'd yes. No comments, no emojis. Then I forwarded it to my personal email, because you never know which records vanish when people start panicking. At 4:17 p.m., I sent one short email to the finance alias. Hi team, quick clarification. Can you confirm who signed the final $8,497.42 expense under executive morale subsection B? Want to make sure documentation is clean ahead of year-end archiving. Appreciate it. Caroline R. No accusation, no tension, just a question floating into the audit logs. And that's when I knew the next move wasn't mine anymore. The pieces were already in motion. All I had to do was let gravity do its work. That night, I went home, fed my cat, and ironed the gray blouse. The one I'd worn during the 2017 restructuring when I saved 8 jobs with a single spreadsheet and got a $50 Starbucks card for my trouble. It still had a faint coffee stain on the cuff. I left it. It felt symbolic. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about symmetry. The louder Ethan had been on his way up, the quieter the fall was going to sound. By Monday morning, the boardroom was already humming. Too many people for a standard compliance review, operations, finance, HR, legal, and of course the CEO himself, looking like a man who hadn't slept all weekend. Ethan sat dead center at the table, glowing like an LED ad for misplaced confidence. He had his AirPods in, a caramel macchiato in hand, and a half-finished keynote deck projected onto the wall behind him. Title slide, Reimagining Gratitude, a Q4 culture win. He was showing photos from the Thanksgiving event, balloons, the grazing board, the dabbing turkey graphic he thought was hilarious. See, this is the kind of energy that breaks stagnation, he said, waving toward the screen like he'd just unveiled the Mona Lisa. We didn't just have a party, we activated a moment. I nearly applauded myself for not laughing. The first 20 minutes went by in the usual haze of buzzwords and spin. He said synergy 6 times, innovation 4, and family twice, probably because his uncle was watching. Then, as he clicked to a slide labeled Budget Transparency, the door opened. Phil Barrett, the auditor, walked in, calm, unbothered, holding a single matte black binder. He didn't apologize for being late. He just took the empty seat at the far end, opened the binder, and slid one sheet of paper toward the CEO. Before we go further, Phil said evenly, we need to address this invoice. The room went still. The only sound was the hum of the projector. The page he'd slid forward read, Invoice NMRF 9387, Event Services, $8,497.42, Executive Morale Subsection B. Phil didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. This was filed without a co-signature, he said. It's coded under a compliance-sensitive expense category. Our question is simple. Who approved it? You could feel the temperature drop. Ethan blinked, then smiled that fake, casual smile that had probably gotten him through every mistake of his life. Oh yeah, he said, leaning back. That was Caroline's idea. She coordinated the logistics. I just gave her the go-ahead. She's been here forever, knows the ropes. The CEO turned his head toward me. So did everyone else. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply opened my folder, sleek, labeled, perfectly aligned, and slid one page across the table toward Phil. Section 12.4, I said evenly. That line item requires officer-level authorization. Phil read the page. The legal director leaned in, eyebrows tightening. The CEO looked confused, like he'd just heard his own name in a foreign language. Ethan chuckled weakly. Come on, it's a holiday party, not a federal case. Phil didn't even blink. It's an unapproved executive morale expenditure, he said. Over $5,000. That makes it a compliance violation tied directly to a federal filing clause. Ethan's grin faltered. He started to speak, stopped, then looked toward his uncle. The CEO leaned forward. You thought what, Ethan? He asked quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Phil turned the binder toward the group, revealing the line item, the lack of a second signature, the timestamp, the budget code. Everything was black and white. No wiggle room, no excuses. My pulse didn't race. My breathing didn't change. I just sat there, a silent witness to the sound of hubris imploding. Ethan finally stammered. We were aligning morale initiatives. I mean, the budget memo was mine, sure, but... Phil interrupted, flipping another page. Yes, this is your memo, he said flatly. Culture Compliance Policy, Refresh V2.0. Dated September 11th. Signed by you. He pushed the sheet forward. Ethan stared at it like he'd never seen it before. This document removed the multi-signature requirement for morale expenses under $10,000, Phil continued, but it failed to reconcile that change with the SEC compliance update issued 3 weeks earlier. The SEC document, also in this binder, takes precedence. Legal's head tilted. That means, she said slowly, you violated your own compliance amendment. The CEO's hands tightened on the table edge, his face drained of color. How bad is it? He asked. Phil didn't hesitate. If we self-report, minimal impact. If it's discovered in a filing audit, it's an ethics violation, possibly reportable. Ethan tried to speak again, but all that came out was air. His uncle just stared at him, wordless, as the realization landed. He'd let family rewrite policy, and now that policy was detonating in public. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed glass. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, trying to form words that refused to come out. His hands twitched near his laptop as if he could scroll his way out of reality. It's just, look, it's Thanksgiving. We were boosting morale, he blurted. You're really going to make this about some paperwork? Phil didn't even look up. Paperwork, he said calmly, is what keeps your company from being subpoenaed, Mr. Price. Then he turned the binder one last time. The missing signature line glared up like a wound. No officer cosign. No compliance log entry. No escape. The CEO's jaw tightened. He ran a hand down his face and finally said, very quietly, You used that budget code, Ethan? Caroline said. He started. Don't! The CEO cut him off, voice sharp enough to slice the air. Don't finish that sentence. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. I just reached down and placed the second binder, the real one, my masterpiece, on the table with the kind of care you reserve for explosives. Heavy stock cover, 12 labeled tabs, every receipt, every email, every Slack thread. I didn't slam it. I just let the weight of it land. I believe this will clarify procedural authorship, I said softly. My tone wasn't cold, just final. Phil opened it first. He flipped through tab after tab like a priest reading confession. Tab 1, Ethan's Culture Refresh Memo, signed and time-stamped. Tab 2, the Q3 Compliance Update, SEC Addendum, Clause 8.3 highlighted in red. Tab 3, the vendor agreement with line-by-line pricing, including the $22 gluten-free stuffing. Tab 4, the expense request filed through the Culture portal, Ethan's name and IP attached. Tab 5, Slack confirmation. Let's gobble up some good vibes, with a turkey emoji. Every tab told the same story. Ethan had authorized the entire 8,497.42 hours under a restricted code. Every line pointed to him. The CEO exhaled slowly, his voice low and raw. So, let me get this straight, he said, eyes never leaving the paper. You created a new workflow, overrode compliance, authorized a restricted fund, and never sought sign-off from finance? Ethan's face had gone white. It was supposed to be. Phil cut in, his tone unchanging. A morale initiative doesn't negate SEC policy. The legal director leaned back in her chair, lips tight. This isn't a slap-on-the-wrist problem. We'll need to file a correction before Q4 closes. Ethan's voice cracked. You can't, this was just an event. Phil looked at him. You signed it. You own it. The words landed like a gavel. Ethan blinked, then turned toward me, his face caught somewhere between pleading and disbelief. Caroline, he said, half whisper, half accusation. You could have told me. I met his eyes evenly. I did, I said, in the documentation you approved. That was it. The moment the air left the room, you could feel the collective understanding roll across the table like a slow, heavy wave. The CEO sank into his chair. The CFO stared at the invoice, unreadable. No one defended him. Not one person. Phil closed his binder. Legal will follow up, he said simply, and began to pack his papers. The scrape of the chair legs sounded like thunder. I stood next, smooth, unhurried. I'll be working remote for the remainder of the quarter, I said. My files are up to date. No one stopped me. The CEO nodded stiffly, his hand still trembling slightly as he turned Ethan's memo over in silence. Ethan didn't speak again. He just sat there, small now, his confidence leaking out through every pore. I zipped my laptop bag, slid the gray binder inside, and walked to the door. The click of my heels on the polished floor echoed louder than any applause could have. No one dared to move until the door shut behind me. The hallway outside was decorated with leftover tinsel and a crooked paper turkey someone had taped near the elevator. A snowman on the lobby table was missing one eye. I passed the receptionist, who looked up, wide-eyed. Everything okay in there? She asked quietly. I gave her the smallest smile. Better than okay, I said. Just finally balanced. Then I walked out into the cold November air. The next morning, the office Slack lit up like a Christmas tree, except instead of cheer, it was panic disguised as politeness. Threads titled Quick Clarification and Follow-Up from Yesterday's Meeting multiplied by the hour. By 9 a.m., half the leadership team had gone silent. By noon, Ethan's name had vanished from the People Directory sidebar. By 2 p.m., HR scheduled a confidential staff debrief. You could almost hear the shredders humming through the floor. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I was at home, working remotely, sipping coffee from a mug that said, World's Okayest Employee. The irony was perfect. My inbox was quiet, except for a single note from Marcy in HR. Hi, Caroline. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know the company is undergoing a leadership transition. Thank you for your professionalism during this time. No apology, no acknowledgement, just HR trying to patch a bullet wound with a pastel Band-Aid. I opened the message, stared at it for a moment, then archived it. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was a calm, steady hum, the sound of balance restored. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Jenna in finance. Holy crap, Caroline. I just saw the internal memo. You're a legend. I didn't respond. Legends make noise. I preferred the quiet. Later that week, a new memo went out company-wide. Subject: Interim Culture Realignment and Policy Reinforcement. The CEO had clearly written it himself. The phrasing was stiff, cautious, haunted. It read, Effective immediately. All morale-related expenditures will require officer-level authorization and dual compliance verification. The board has initiated a review of our internal governance workflows to ensure alignment with federal standards. That's corporate speak for, we're in trouble, and someone's lawyer just called. By Thursday, rumors had evolved into gospel. Ethan had been placed on administrative leave pending review. He'd cleaned out his desk under supervision, wearing the same overpriced sneakers that once squeaked through meetings. Someone said he tried to charm security on the way out. Someone else said he'd cried in the parking lot. I didn't ask which version was true. Both sounded right. I went in on Friday morning to collect my personal things. Not because I had to, but because closure deserves physical space. The office was half empty, the fluorescent lights humming with that sterile, post-scandal stillness. My desk looked smaller than I remembered. Just a potted plant, a mug, and the binder that started it all. As I packed, Jenna appeared, peeking around the cubicle wall. "They're saying he tried to blame you," she whispered. "Told the CEO you tricked him with fake codes." I smiled faintly. "Then he should have read the policy he wrote." She grinned, shaking her head. "You're ice cold. Just document it," I said. When I left, I walked past Ethan's office. The blinds were half drawn, the desk empty except for a lonely nameplate that read Ethan Price, Director of People Strategy. Someone had left a single turkey decoration on the door, probably as a joke. It was perfect. The CEO's door was closed, but through the frosted glass I could see silhouettes. Legal counsel, a board member, maybe two. Damage control mode. I didn't linger. I'd already played my part. Outside, the winter air bit sharp against my face. Chicago in December has that clean kind of cold, the kind that feels like it's scrubbing something away. I stood there a long moment, binder in hand, watching my breath drift into the wind. People always assume revenge feels like fireworks, like explosions or applause. It doesn't. It feels like this: quiet, balanced, inevitable. The system doesn't need your anger. It just needs you to understand how it works better than the people abusing it. That's how you survive 19 years in operations. That's how you win without raising your voice. By the time the new year rolled around, Brookhaven Dynamics had a different energy. Quieter, thinner, like the air after a thunderstorm. Ethan Price was gone, officially departed to pursue new opportunities. Translation: he'd been escorted out by security 3 weeks before Christmas. The internal memo framed it as a mutual decision. I almost laughed when I read it. Mutual? Only if you count gravity as a mutual agreement when someone steps off a cliff. I never saw him again, but word trickled in. He'd tried consulting for a startup in Austin. Lasted 3 weeks before someone Googled his name and found the board minutes from the compliance meeting. The internet never forgets, especially not corporate filings. The CEO stayed, barely. His holiday speeches got shorter. The phrase, "family is our foundation," quietly disappeared from his vocabulary. During January's town hall, he wore the same expression I'd seen on every leader who thought loyalty meant bloodlines instead of boundaries. Exhausted, ashamed. A man realizing his legacy had teeth marks. As for me, I kept my head down. I didn't ask for my old title back. Didn't need it. I had leverage now. The kind that isn't loud or flashy, but sits quietly in the corner of every decision like a ghost everyone pretends not to see. They gave me a special projects role. Flexible schedule, remote option, access to all the systems I built. A soft promotion disguised as discretion. Sometimes, when I logged in, I'd see remnants of Ethan's culture refresh still lingering in the shared drive. Half-finished PowerPoints, folders labeled Vibe Initiatives, and Team Synergy Pilot. I deleted them one by one, slowly, methodically. Each click felt like sweeping dust off a clean floor. One afternoon in February, Marcy from HR messaged me. "Hi, Caroline. Would you be open to consulting on our new compliance training series? The board would really value your insight on policy integrity." Policy integrity. The same phrase Ethan once mocked during his onboarding. I almost typed a sarcastic reply, but instead, I just wrote, "Of course. Happy to help ensure proper alignment. That's the trick. You don't burn the system. You make it remember your fingerprints." A week later, I got a small envelope in interoffice mail. Inside was a note from Phil Barrett, the auditor who'd flipped the binder that morning. It was handwritten, sharp and brief. Sometimes silence does more work than shouting ever could. Respect. I kept it in my desk drawer, right next to the gray binder. The company limped through Q1. A few executives quietly transitioned. The compliance portal Ethan had insisted on was replaced by something simpler, cleaner. The new version required 3 sign-offs and auto-flagged every morale expense over $1,000. I smiled when I saw that update roll out. It was the digital equivalent of a headstone. Outside of work, life went back to something resembling peace. I spent my weekends cooking, walking along Lake Michigan, catching up on books I hadn't touched in years. My cat finally stopped sleeping on the keyboard. The noise was gone, replaced by something slower, steadier. Every now and then, someone new would join the company, hear whispers of the Thanksgiving thing, and ask about it over coffee. I'd just shrug. Documentation saves lives, I'd say. That was enough. In March, the CEO stopped me in the hallway, first time he'd spoken directly to me since that meeting. "Caroline," he said, clearing his throat, "we're grateful for how you handled everything." I nodded. I was just doing my job. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Maybe because he finally understood what that meant. Later that evening, I sat at home with a glass of wine, watching the city lights blur against the frost. I thought about Ethan, his sneakers, his slogans, his downfall. I didn't feel joy or pity, just confirmation. Sometimes, justice isn't a headline. It's a folder quietly labeled Resolved. I opened my laptop, found the file one last time. Price, ethics packet, final, and archived it. Then I closed the lid, exhaled, and smiled into the quiet. For the first time in 19 years, I didn't feel like furniture in someone else's office. I felt like the architect, and the system, it finally obeyed.